Chapter 34. The End of the Beginning. I'd met Victoria before, I was certain of that. Briefly, at some after-show drinks years earlier. I could tell she hadn't remembered. This meeting was different, though. Last time, I hadn't fallen in love with her. This was a very posh party. It was a film premiere party, the reward for having been to a film premiere, which I'd just discovered is quite a distracting way to watch a film. It was 2007, and I was starting to get invited to this sort of thing, but usually I was filming or doing a panel show or my back hurt too much. But my back was on the mend, thanks to all the walking, and I'd been personally invited to this rather than just getting an email through my agent, so here I was. I was immensely glad. There were lots of famous people there, some of whom had introduced themselves to me and said nice things. They thought I was famous too, it seemed, so there was a sort of implied acquaintanceship between us. I liked this, but it also made me queasy. Then she'd been introduced to me, and I'd said we'd once met, just out of pedantry, really, and she had neither denied nor remembered it. She was all chatty and sparky and gossipy and interesting, and it seems ridiculous that I can't remember a single thing she said, though I can still see her face looking up at me when I close my eyes. After a while, the little chatting group developed and widened. She was a couple of yards away from me now, and I was talking to a middle-aged woman who had some theory about comedy. I wasn't interested, but I still considered parties like this to be basically hostile environments, so I was also grateful to the middle-aged woman for paying me the attention. But then she was back, in my eyeline again, interrupting the woman. "Do you smoke?" She was gesturing towards the door. "I'm a moron." "No," I said. I was just answering the question. I hadn't had a cigarette for about 6 months, so I felt like I didn't really smoke. I only ever have a bit. I didn't want to lie to her. Amused irritation flashed noticeably across her face. Irritation, though, not disappointment. I suspect she already knew. She went off for a cigarette. She kind of had to now, but was back quite soon, if not quite soon enough. She wasn't trying to mingle. I was pretty sure she was flirting, but was unwilling to believe my instincts, as that seemed too good to be true. We talked for a long time. I think the main topic of conversation was how awkward parties like this were, and how some people seemed so adult and adept about working their way round them, but how we found that difficult and didn't know how you were supposed to break into other conversations. We. I hoped she didn't really want to break into another conversation, because I certainly didn't. I wanted to stay in this one forever. The pessimist in me said that she was just what she said she was, a bad mingler, someone shy at parties who didn't know how to break away from someone else shy at parties. Eventually she did. I really should go and say hello to... I can't remember who she said. I was suddenly too depressed to care. Maybe see you in a bit? She walked away, and I got the first wave of a sensation that would become familiar to me. Missing her. I date the current phase of my life from that party. I changed then. Everything that happened to me after that moment, even incidental things, are in a different context, a new world where different things matter. We went on a few dates. I clumsily managed to organize that, self-consciously booking a restaurant for a time and a place, and then feeling amazed, touched, and flattered when she actually turned up. This beautiful, exciting woman, just to see me, wearing clothes that she'd picked out while thinking of me. But it didn't work out. She emailed me and explained, carefully, lovingly, really, why it wasn't a good time for her and how she felt something, in fact had strong feelings for me, but didn't think it could work at the moment. But can't one always get over that? Timing can't be crucial, not outside the context of a joke. And she said she'd met someone else as well. Ah. She didn't know what would come of that, and who knows, maybe in 6 months or so. But it was a bad time, a very bad time. Her father had just died. Everything was wrong. It may sound strange, but I treasured that email. It was such a reluctant brush-off. I felt it was almost a sign of achievement for me. Part of me was amazed, overjoyed even, that I'd got so close so quickly to someone I'd fallen for. Because I knew I could only be with someone I'd fallen for, and I wasn't falling for people very often anymore. and it had never been quite like this. Close but no cigar, as Ellis said. Well, that's all right, I thought. Give it another 34 years and you'll meet someone else nice. I did not think that. I didn't blame her. She'd been clear, honest and fair, and I loved her. But I didn't really know how to cope. Being single had never made me lonely before. Now the feeling was crippling. There were couples everywhere, it seemed. Everyone had someone. I wanted someone more than I'd ever done before at precisely the same moment that I realized that only one person would do. Never was I more bitterly aware that I didn't have 3 wishes. But what if I'd already had a wish? What if I'd used it up? I'd wanted my career success so much and for so long. Had I wasted my luck, my wish on that, something that seemed so trivial now? My career, acting, comedy, which at the time of every other crush had been a consolation and a distraction, this time felt like a rebuke. That's the cold, selfish, glittery object of my desire that I get, instead of her. Try and console yourself with that, sneers the genie. Shepherd's Bush Green is not a nice place to walk, I think to myself as I cross it diagonally northwestwards, weaving between bench-focused gatherings of chatting tramps. It's noisy and ugly, but I'm used to walking in drab, boring, featureless places. For years, from the end of 2007, it didn't matter where I walked. I wasn't looking at the view. I started walking for my back. I kept going because of her. It made thinking about her more bearable. If I got more miserable, I could just speed up. Drinking helped, too. I'd always liked getting drunk in the pub or at parties. Now I had a real use for it. At the end of a miserable day, you could use it to speed up time, almost like cutting to the next morning's hangover. So I did that a lot. A few times, when drunk, I'd get off with someone. The booze allowed me to tell myself that it might make me feel better. Maybe I'll manage to fall in love with this person instead, I always wondered. It seems that it can happen very quickly. And surely I should be doing something to shake myself out of my obsession with a woman who's going out with someone else. One of those pissed late-night snogs was captured by a paparazzo and printed in Heat magazine. That felt pretty humiliating. What a fool I'd been, I thought. I had no personal life to speak of, not even much experience of how to meet women and form relationships, and yet I'd already become famous. If I was ever to work any of this out, relationships, women, life, as I probably should have done as a teenager, I'd have to do it sneaking around because the press might be interested. I was snogging a girl outside a bar, for God's sake. That is a normal thing to do, something I should have done more often, and now thousands of people will have seen. No one, I thought bitterly, can have had a higher percentage of their life's snogs appear in the papers than me. I wasn't ashamed of what I'd done, but I was embarrassed for it to be shown to the world, as if someone had taken a picture of me washing my balls or having a shit. It dawned on me gradually that quite a lot of people who I didn't know were interested in my private life, or my apparent lack of one. My profile had grown slowly. Initially, Peep Show had barely been noticed, but as more series aired, more people became aware of it. Then some became aware of the sketch show. Others started to see me crop up on panel shows. Gradually, the likelihood of a stranger knowing who I was had grown. And as it grew, I was interviewed more often by newspapers, and the nature of the questions I was asked in those interviews changed. They were fishing for details of my private life. I suppose that's natural. People are always interested in that sort of thing, and my character in Peep Show has his private life very much to the fore. They wanted to know how mine compared. And I'd certainly implied in panel shows, as a way of getting a laugh and developing a persona that people could get a handle on, that I was a lonely, dysfunctional OCD loser. For years I was very happy with this image. People found it funny, and when I wasn't that well known, they didn't want to dig any deeper. The language of lonely self-loathing gets a lot of laughs when bluntly used in a comic context. It's like doing a sketch about the Samaritans. But in an interview, the context becomes more serious. They weren't letting me paint a stereotypical broad-brush picture of an isolated wanker. They wanted details. And because I was broken-hearted, it was a joke that was getting a bit too edgy for me anyway. It made me sad to describe myself as so sad. Is that what you're really like? Interviewers wanted to know. Lots of women find you attractive, you know. Just look at the internet. It was absolutely true that by Googling my name, I could find lots of examples of people saying that they fancied me. Usually, they added, to their surprise. But then some people will fancy anyone who's on telly. That just turns them on, as sometimes does being funny, as does being unattainable, as does not being there in real life. All wrong, normal, unglamorous, unhilarious, hairy, human, like people are when you actually know them. I get it a lot on Twitter, people saying they fancy me or asking their friends if it's wrong that they fancy me, which is definitely a backhanded compliment, or possibly a backhanded insult. It's all a bit of an ego boost, I suppose, but I think that moment of saying they fancied me would always be the high point of the relationship, so there's no need to take it any further. Even in my memories of my racy encounter with the girl at Cambridge who was keen to bed a Footlights president, it's only the initial realization that's an exciting memory. After that, it fades to drunkenness and guilt. I suppose if you do decide to shag groupies, and I'm not saying those who do are necessarily wrong, as I'm sure it can be done in a fun and mutually satisfying way, you have to deal, as soon as it becomes clear that you're up for it, with your sudden lowering in the groupie's estimation. It's like what I get when someone realizes I'm not the novelist. Suddenly you've become attainable to the groupie. The excitement of fancying a star from afar evaporates, and they have to deal with the reality of a stranger's body, usually an older man's. There were lots of things about my life that seemed to baffle interviewers. Why did I still live in an ex-council flat in Kilburn was a very common question. Why did I show no interest in some of the trappings of fame, expensive cars or clothes or giant TVs? Perhaps I came across as some sort of weird ascetic, or the kind of person who keeps himself to himself and is later discovered to be dwelling on a pit of human bones. I think people thought I had something to hide. Maybe he's gay and can't admit it, they may have thought, or spends all his money on morphine, or, as the Heat photo might have suggested, he's as promiscuous as Russell Brand but is somehow managing to do it on the quiet. What is his secret? Was the implied question I feared. So I tried to be honest, when I went on Desert Island Discs at least, about the bare facts of my life and how I felt, that I was single and unhappy. I resented the interest. I don't think, that the specifics of my private life were anyone's business. I was just a purveyor of comedy. If people liked it, they could keep watching. If not, they should stop. I didn't want to encourage people to buy in too much to what I was really like. They couldn't know me personally, and I didn't want to be trapped into creating the illusion that they could, an illusion that might subsequently be shattered if I was caught on film strangling a cat. But mainly I resented it because I was hiding something. I couldn't stop thinking about Victoria. I was hopelessly in love in a way that wouldn't go away. That's why I had no private life to speak of, because I didn't want one, couldn't face one without her. I told no one about it. Never mind interviewers. I didn't tell my closest friends or my parents of the enormous sadness that overshadowed my life. I didn't tell them because I was ashamed and I knew what they'd say. Stop indulging yourself in these hopeless feelings. Snap out of it. She doesn't want to go out with you. She said so. She's going out with someone else. It's not the end of the world. It happens to people all the time. It's happened to you before. Deal with it. They would probably have put it more gently than that, but I'm sure that's what they'd have said I should do. So if I already knew that, what was the point in telling them? It was stupid to have such an all-consuming crush at my age, so I couldn't talk about it, and without doing so, I couldn't adequately explain my life. I didn't want to move from Kilburn, partly because my friends lived there, but mainly because it would be a sign of my life moving on without her. I didn't want to change any major aspect of my existence on my own. I wanted to do it as part of my future with her. I couldn't let go of that hope, even when I told myself that I should. And my career just went from strength to strength, as if taking the piss. I had a successful sitcom and sketch show on the go at once. I was a sought-after guest for panel shows. I was a praised columnist in a fine newspaper. Everyone wanted to make a programme with me. Everyone seemed to be saying I was the next Stephen Fry. And, because of the walking coupled with the appetite-suppressant effect of a broken heart, I'd lost some weight. I was looking healthier and more attractive. Every wish had come true, except the one that mattered. The 6 months or so came and went. I'd occasionally see her at panel show recordings. If there was a peep show screening party, I'd invite her. She'd come and we'd chat and it would be lovely, but I was never left in any doubt about her status. She had a boyfriend. That was that. I waited for 3 years. Isn't that weird? Aren't I odd? I can't explain it other than to say that I couldn't do anything else. She's not only too wonderful, she's too right for me. Any sane straight man would find her attractive, but she's funny, bright, sexy, nervous, and confident in ways that could have been meant for me. I suppose that's why I waited. I couldn't shake the cheesy thought that it was meant to be. 3 years after we met at that party, met for the second time, I bloody-mindedly can't not say, she became single again, and we went on some dates again. It was different this time. We started gradually, secretly, really, but each week we spent more time together than the last. I switched over from feeling cursed, as if the world had been constructed to spite me, to feeling so much luckier than I believed I could ever deserve. If only I'd known I just had to wait 3 years, I kept thinking. That was nothing. I would have gladly suffered 10 times as much, as long as I'd known it would work out and we'd have our chance. It's so much easier to talk about what makes you unhappy than what makes you happy, I'm now discovering. And I am happy now, I can't deny it. And I'm happy because of Victoria. All my priorities are different now, and better. In March, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. In fact, to my unsurpassable delight, she said, "Of course. Of course we're getting married. It's obvious." Perhaps I should have asked her at that party. There's a downside to all this, and I don't mean not being able to drink beer in the bath or scratch my balls during dinner because she insists on both. Neither do I mean the fact that we won't be living in Kilburn, although I'll miss it. But Harlesden it has to be, she insists. The downside is the fear. The fear of something happening to her, the pressure of there being 2 bodies in the world that I want to keep from harm and only being able to watchfully inhabit one of them. I wonder if you know what I mean. I hope you do, for your sake. It's a worry I'll have to learn to live with, because I'm definitely out of wishes. And whatever happens from now on, I want to concentrate on being grateful. I thought I was too old to change. Someone once told me that anything you haven't done by the age of 28, you'll probably never do. And by my mid-30s, I'd never formed a long-term relationship, never moved in with anyone, hardly ever got off with the same woman twice. Now I've met someone who I can't live without, and I don't have to. So I'm inexpressibly grateful to her and to fate for this change, this miracle. It would have been an incomplete life, one not properly lived, if I'd never fully loved or had the amazing feeling of it being reciprocated.